Are we good? Okay. So last time, as you'll recall, we were discussing madness and melancholy. Johnson said, "A madman loves to be with people whom he fears, not as a dog fears the lash, but of whom he stands in awe." I was struck with the justice of this observation. To be with those of whom a person whose mind is wavering and dejected stands in awe, represses and composes an uneasy tumult of spirits, and consoles him with the contemplation of something steady and at least comparatively great. He added, "Madmen are all sensual in the lower stages of this temper. They are eager for gratifications to soothe their minds and divert their attention from the misery which they suffer. But when they grow very ill, pleasure is too weak for them, and they seek for pain. Employment, sir, and hardships prevent melancholy. I suppose in all our army in America there was not one man who went mad." Okay. Footnote here from Boswell. We read in the Gospels that those unfortunate persons who were possessed with evil spirits, which, after all, I think is the most probable cause of madness, as was first suggested to me by my respectable friend Sir John Pringle, had recourse to pain, tearing themselves and jumping sometimes into the fire, sometimes into the water. Mr. Seward has furnished me with a remarkable anecdote in confirmation of Dr. Johnson's observation. A tradesman who had acquired a large fortune in London retired from business and went to live at Worcester. His mind, being without its usual occupation and having nothing else to supply its place, preyed upon itself, so that existence was a torment to him. At last he was seized with a stone, and a friend who found him in one of its severest fits, having expressed his concern, "No, sir," said he, "don't pity me. What I now feel is ease compared with that torture of mine from which it relieves me." All right. We entered seriously upon a question of much importance to me, which Johnson was pleased to consider with friendly attention. I had long complained to him that I felt myself discontented in Scotland as too narrow a sphere, and that I wished to make my chief residence in London, the great scene of ambition, instruction, and amusement, a scene which was to me, comparatively speaking, a heaven upon earth. Johnson said, "Why, sir, I never knew anyone who had such a gust for London as you have, and I cannot blame you for your wish to live here. But yet, sir, were I in your father's place, I should not consent to your settling there, for I have the old feudal notions, and I should be afraid that Onlek would be deserted, as you would soon find it more desirable to have a country seat in a better climate. I own, however, that to consider it as a duty to reside on a family estate is a prejudice, for we must consider that working people get employment equally, and the produce of land is sold equally, whether a great family resides at home or not. And if the rents of an estate be carried to London, they return again in the circulation of commerce. Nay, sir, we must perhaps allow that carrying to rents to a distance is a good, because it contributes to that circulation. We must, however, allow that a well-regulated great family may improve a neighborhood in civility and elegance, and give an example of good order, virtue, and piety. And so its residence at home may be of much advantage. But if a great family be disorderly and vicious, its residence at home is very pernicious to a neighborhood. There is not now the same inducement to live in the country as formerly. The pleasures of social life are much better enjoyed in town, and there is no longer in the country that power and influence in proprietors of land which they had in old times, and which made the country so agreeable to them. The Laird of Auchinleck now is not near so great a man as the Laird of Anlech was 100 years ago. I told him that one of my ancestors never went from home without being attended by 30 men on horseback. Johnson's shrewdness and spirit of inquiry were exerted upon every occasion. Pray, said he, how did your ancestor support his 30 men and 30 horses when he went at a distance from home, in an age when there was hardly any money in circulation? I suggested the same difficulty to a friend who mentioned Douglas's going to the Holy Land with a numerous train of followers. Douglas could, no doubt, maintain followers enough while living upon his own lands, the produce of which supplied them with food, but he could not carry that food to the Holy Land. And as there was no commerce by which he could be supplied with money, how could he maintain them in foreign countries? Can't tell if this is I guess this is Johnson speaking. I couldn't tell if this was a mark on my page or if this is a quote mark. It's a quote mark, I believe. I suggested a doubt that if I were to reside in London, the inquisite zest with which I relieve it. Oh, okay. This is just, it looks like maybe it's a typo. Okay, so this is Boswell talking still. I suggested a doubt that if I were to reside in London, the exquisite zest with which I relished it in occasional visits might go off, and I might grow tired of it. Johnson answered, why, sir, you find no man at all intellectual who is willing to leave London. No, sir. When a man is tired of London, he is tired of life. For there is in London all that life can afford. That's a good quote. And has that been in here before, or is that just like a famous quote? That's a nice one, though. To obviate his apprehension that by settling in London I might desert the seat of my ancestors, I assured him that I had only old feudal principles to a degree of enthusiasm, and that I felt all the dulcedo of the natale solum, sweetness of the native soil, to quote Ovid. I reminded him that the Laird of Anlech had an elegant house in front of which he could ride 10 miles forward upon his own territories, upon which he had upwards of 600 people attached to him. That the family seat was rich in natural romantic beauties of rock, wood, and water, and that in my Morn of Life I had appropriated the finest descriptions of the ancient classics to certain scenes there, which were thus associated in my mind. That when all this was considered, I should certainly pass a part of the year at home, and enjoy it the more from variety and from bringing with me a share of the intellectual stores of the metropolis. He listened to all this, and kindly hoped it might be as I now supposed. He said, a country gentleman should bring his lady to visit London as soon as he can, that they may have agreeable topics for conversation when they are by themselves. And also Boswell's kind of cheats on his wife a lot if you read about him. So maybe Johnson's implying something there as well, that she should be there. I don't know. Just maybe I'm reading too much of that. As I meditated trying my fortune in Westminster Hall, our conversation turned upon the profession of the law in England. Johnson said, you must not indulge too sanguine hopes, should you be called to our bar. I was told by a very sensible lawyer that there are a great many chances against any man's success in the profession of the law. The candidates are so numerous, and those who get large practice so few. He said it was by no means true that a man of good parts and application is sure of having business, though he indeed allowed that if such a man could but appear in a few causes, his merits would be known, and he would get forward. But that the great risk was that a man might pass half a lifetime in the courts and never have an opportunity of showing his abilities. Footnote here from Boswell. Now, at the distance of 15 years since this conversation passed, The observation which I have had an opportunity of making in Westminster Hall has convinced me that, however true the opinion of Dr. Johnson's legal friend may have been some time ago, the same certainty of success cannot now be promised to the same display of merit. The reasons, however, of the rapid rise of some and the disappointment of others equally respectable are such as it might seem invidious to mention, and would require a longer detail than would be proper for this work. We talked of employment being absolutely necessary to preserve the mind from wearying and growing fretful, especially in those who have a tendency to melancholy. This is true. And I mentioned to him a saying which somebody had related of an American savage who, when a European was expatiating on all these advantages of money, put this question: will it purchase occupation? It says here this person was JB. I forgot his name. That's all it says. Oh, that's what JB means. James Boswell, right? Is that his first name? I think so, right? It's embarrassed. I don't know. Can't remember his first name right now. I think it's James Boswell, right? Or is it Thomas Boswell? I gotta look this up now. James Boswell, yeah. Okay, so when I saw that in the index, JB, but that didn't really help because the whole. I'm sorry, I'm getting off track here. Anyway, it just says he forgot his name. Johnson said about this, so having an occupation. Depend upon it, sir, this saying is too refined for a savage. And, sir, money will purchase occupation. It will purchase all the conveniences of life. It will purchase variety of company. It will purchase all sorts of entertainment. I talked to him of Forster's Voyage to the South Seas, which pleased me, but I found he did not like it. Sir, said Johnson, there is a great affectation of fine writing in it. I said, but he carries you along with him. Johnson said, no, sir, he does not carry me along with him. He leaves me behind him. Or rather, indeed, he sets me behind him, before him. He sets me before him, for he makes me turn over many leaves at a time. Anyway, let's move on to the next day. On Sunday, September 21st, we went to the church of Ashburn, which is one of the largest and most luminous that I have seen in any town of the same size. I felt great satisfaction in considering that I was supported in my fondness for solemn public worship by the general occurrence and munificence of mankind. Johnson and Taylor were so different from each other that I wondered at their preserving such an intimacy. Their having been at school and college together might in some degree account for this, but Sir Joshua Reynolds had furnished me with a stronger reason. For Johnson mentioned to him that he had been told by Taylor he was to be his heir. I shall not take upon me to animadvert upon this. Animadvert. I can never pronounce it right. But certain it is that Johnson paid great attention to Taylor. He now, however, said to me, Sir, I love him, but I do not love him more. My regard for him does not increase. As it is said in the Apocrypha, his talk is of bullocks. Footnote here, that's from Ecclesiasticus. The whole chapter may be read as an admirable illustration of the superiority of cultivated minds over the gross and illiterate. I do not suppose he is very fond of my company. His habits are by no means sufficiently clerical. This he knows that I see, and no man likes to live under the eye of perpetual disapprobation. Back to Boswell now. I have no doubt that a good many sermons were composed for Taylor by Johnson. This time I found upon his table a part of one which he had newly begun to write, and Concio pro Tayloro, a sermon for Taylor, appears in one of his diaries. When to these circumstances we add the internal evidence from the power of thinking and style in the collection which the Reverend Mr. Hayes has published, with the significant title of Sermons Left for Publication by the Reverend John Taylor, LL.D., our conviction will be complete. I, however, would not have it thought that Dr. Taylor, though he could not write like Johnson, as indeed who could, did not sometimes compose sermons as good as those which we generally have from very respectable divines. He showed me one which notes on the margin in Johnson's handwriting, and I was present when he read another to Johnson that he might have his opinion of it, and Johnson said it was very well. These we may be sure were not Johnson's, for he was above little arts or tricks of deception. Johnson was by no means of opinion that every man of a learned profession should consider it an incumbent upon him, or as necessary to his credit, to appear as an author. When in the ardor of ambition for literary fame, I regretted to him one day that an eminent judge, footnote here tells us is probably Lord Alwyn Clark, Boswell's father, had nothing of it, and therefore would leave no perpetual monument of himself to posterity. Johnson said, "Alas, sir, what a mass of confusion should we have if every bishop and every judge, every lawyer, physician, and divine were to write books." I mentioned to Johnson a respectable person, says here Lord Alwyn Clark again, of a very strong mind, who had little of that tenderness which is common to human nature, as an instance of which, when I suggested to him that he should invite his son, that would be David Boswell, who had been settled 10 years in foreign parts, to come home and pay him a visit, his answer was, No, let him mind his business. Johnson answered to this, "I do not agree with him, sir, in this. Getting money is not at all a man's business. To cultivate kindness is a valuable part of the business of life." In the evening, Johnson, being in very good spirits, entertained us with several characteristical portraits. I regret that any of them escaped my retention and diligence. I found from experience that to collect my friend's conversation so as to exhibit it with any degree of its original flavor, it was necessary to write it down without delay. To record his sayings after some distance of time was like preserving or pickling long-kept and faded fruits, or other vegetables, which, when in that state, have little or nothing of their taste when fresh. I shall present my readers with a series of what I gathered this evening from the Johnstonian garden. Quote, my friend, the late Earl of Cork, had a great desire to maintain the literary character of his family. He was a genteel man, but did not keep up the dignity of his rank. He was so generally civil that nobody thanked him for it. Another quoted part. Did we not hear so much said of Jack Wilkes? We should think more highly of his conversation. Jack has great variety of talk. Jack is a scholar, and Jack has the manners of a gentleman. But after hearing his name sounded from pole to pole as the phoenix of convivial felicity, we are disappointed in his company. He has always been at me, but I would do Jack a kindness rather than not. The contest is now over. Another quoted part. Garrick's gaiety of conversation has delicacy and elegance. Foote makes you laugh more, but Foote has the air of a buffoon paid for entertaining the company. He indeed well deserves his hire. Okay, I'll read one more page. Why not? I was blubbering on there for a while. Collie Kibber once consulted me as to one of his birthday odes a long time before it was wanted. I objected very freely to several passages. Kibber lost patience and would not read his ode to an end. When we had done with criticism, We walked over to Richardson's, the author of Clarissa, and I wondered to find Richardson displeased that I did not treat Cibber with more respect. Now, sir, to talk of respect for a player, smiling disdainfully. I said to this, there, sir, you are always heretical. You never will allow merit to a player. Johnson answered me. Merit, sir? What merit? Do you respect a rope dancer or a ballad singer? I said, no, sir, but we respect a great player as a man who can conceive lofty sentiments and can express them gracefully. Johnson answered, what, sir, a fellow who claps a hump on his back and a lump on his leg and cries, I am Richard III. Nay, sir, a ballad singer is a higher man, for he does two things. He repeats and he sings. There is both recitation and music in his performance. The player only recites. I love how much he hates actors. I said, my dear sir, you may turn anything into ridicule. I allow that a player of farce is not entitled to respect. He does a little thing. But he who can represent exalted characters and touch the noblest passions has very respectable powers, and mankind have agreed in admiring great talents for the stage. We must consider, too, that a great player does what very few are capable to do. His art is a very rare faculty. Who can repeat Hamlet's soliloquy, to be or not to be, as Garrick does it? Johnson answered, anybody may. Jemmy. Says here that's James Fieldhouse. There, who was a boy about 8 years old, who was in the room. We'll do it as well in a week. I answered to that. No, sir, and as proof of that merit of great acting and of the value which mankind sets upon it, Garrick has got 100,000 pounds. Johnson answered, is getting 100,000 pounds a proof of excellence? That has been done by a scoundrel commissary. It says here in a footnote that scoundrel commissary was Robert Paris Taylor. This is Boswell here ruminating on this. This was most fallacious reasoning. I was sure for once that I had the best side of the argument. I boldly maintained the just distinction between a tragedian and a mere theatrical droll, between those who rouse our terror and pity and those who only make us laugh. If, said I, Betterton and Foote were to walk into this room, you would respect Betterton much more than Foote. Johnson answered, if Betterton were to walk into this room with Foote, Foote would soon drive him out of it. Foote, sir, Quintinus Foote, has power superior to them all. All right, that's enough for today. So Marlon Brando and let's see, who else? Carrot Top, I guess, are equal in the eyes of Samuel Johnson. Well, until next time, bye from Boswell.